Hello. This week I'm interviewing inspirational women about their stories and particularly how they have embraced diversity. And today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Silje who has an incredible story. So thank you, Silje.
My pleasure.
Okay. But before we hear about your story, shall we just start? Today's theme for International Women's Day is Embrace Equity. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, good question. The first thing that pops into my mind, Gillian, is the value you have in a house. If we all sort of been on the house market and you say, "Oh, what's my equity?" But actually, my favorite example of equity is where equality is about everybody getting a pair of shoes. Equity is about everybody getting a pair of shoes that fits.
Yes.
And I think that is a beautiful way of looking at we all as human beings have value. We're not all the same. Yes, we deserve equality, but actually it's more about the value I have as a human being, what I'm bringing to the world, my potential, and how we create a community of belonging, community and families, workplaces, whatever it is, where we can all be who we are and be comfortable about what we're bringing, being comfortable about our potential and who we are, and also not knowing that we're not all the same. So I'm not going to do exactly the same as somebody else. Actually, what I'm contributing is something different, and to be comfortable with that, and be who we are. I think that's what equity is.
It's a wonderful answer, and I agree. It's all about inclusivity and feeling we can be who we are and that we're supported by people around us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Now, people listening will have noticed that your accent is slightly different here, and your story is just such an unusual, inspirational one. So tell us a bit about you and some of the adversity you've had to overcome.
Yeah, so my name is obviously Silje, which is a very Scandinavian name. So I'm Norwegian, but I've lived in the UK for over 20 years. So fell in love with an Englishman, I guess, is my downfall. I have three teenage kids and love my life. And when I was a very young mum, I guess my story is one of hardship and adversity, um, but how to sort of manage life on a day-to-day basis. When my kids were young, I just woke up one morning um, thinking, have I broken my leg in the night? What has happened? How did I have done that? I remember calling my mum saying, can you have broken your foot without knowing how you've done it? My mum saying, being a nurse, no, that sounds a bit weird. And that basically started an 8-year process of pain, on living with pain, overcoming living with pain and what that brings of day-to-day challenges. It was later diagnosed as CRPS, which basically is doctors' answers of going, I can see that something's not right. It really is hurting, but there's nothing we can fix. After 8 years, I chose to have my leg amputated to see if that would give me a better outcome and a better life quality, which it did. But again, I'm in hospital surrounding 5.5 years later because I've had a revision surgery. But it was the right decision to do. But it was that taking a leap of faith, not knowing what this is going to look like, but knowing I couldn't live in the pain condition I was with the kids. I felt more like a grandma than I felt like a mum to them, which was painful for me. But I guess my story is also about finding what matters to you on an everyday basis and learning how to set goals towards things that's meaningful and brings meaning even in your hardest of times. And when then life gives you a second chance, how that is a habit that actually has benefited me. Because when I came out on the other side, I still set goals. I still look at what meaning I can bring, what joy I can bring to my own life, what little things I can do every day to make sure I bring the things that I value to my everyday life, like kindness, and all this sort of stuff. What have I done today to be kind? What have I done to make somebody seen and heard? What have I done today to chase my dreams? And what have I done to do today to sort of include the things that matters to me?
It's an incredible story, and I'm sure that people watching this will be thinking, the decision to have your leg amputated because of pain and having 3 young children is a massive decision to have to make, and to think through the consequences of that.
Yeah. There's a quote by a guy that I really like that's called, sometimes you have to jump and build your wings on the way down. And it felt like that. It felt like jumping out into the unknown, and also jumping on the unknown from the doctors as well. They were saying, we can't promise anything. You might still be in pain with one leg less, but sometimes there is that thing that really stirs you inside, that makes you go, no, it feels right, the right thing to do. And I followed that voice. I followed that sort of conscious decision. Obviously we talked it through with a lot of people, and my husband and my kids were on board. And but I'd battled with that question
Yes.
for already, quite a long time. So in one sense, it felt like a relief to me when they agreed, because it felt like at least I can try something.
Yes.
And over the years, we tried is medical trials of different drugs and more drugs, and and nothing worked. So yes, it was drastic, and being in rehab with other people who's lost their leg through trauma, for me to say, actually, I see that's painful for you, and I see that's a shock for you, but for me, I chose it. I chose that, which to them is a big shock, because who would choose that? But actually, for me, it was that sort of, I'm going to build my wings on my way down.
And I know you're in hospital in rehab at the moment, having had yet another partial amputation to get better, which again is incredible. But you've done some incredible things in your life, and there's one goal I'm thinking of. You know which one I'm thinking of, which I'm sure people would love to hear about.
Yeah. Being Norwegian, and I often like to, when I do any facilitation, I often say, let's define ourselves by the things that we love. And the thing that always is highest on my list is mountains. I grown up in Norway, love mountains, and for years, that was quite a painful thing for me, being on cabin holidays with my family when I had to sit inside and they went out hiking in the summer, skiing in the winter. And those things, was something I would really want to do. And I remember having a dreams list, and on my dreams list was bike ride with my family, but also climbing a mountain was highest on my dreams list. And when I had my amputation, and for the first time took a few steps and with my prosthetic, and I thought, there is no pain here. Suddenly that went from being a far off, almost painful dream to something I could put down as a goal. And it became something I worked really hard for. So obviously I hadn't walked for 8 years. So it took a lot of work. It took a lot of, this week I'm going to walk to the end of my street. This week I'm going to try on even ground in the woods near where I live. This week I'm going to walk to the high street. And it was increasing the sort of stamina all the time. But because I knew something that I wanted, something that mattered, something I really felt inner motivation for and joy towards, I worked hard, and 2 years after just shy of 2 years after my amputation, I climbed Mount Snowdon with my family, and that was huge for me. And I often say this, what, thousands of people do that every day. Some people do without blinking, they don't even think about it. But for me, it was a massive accomplishment of a dream that was one day just a painful sort of memory to becoming something I achieved through hard work. And you know what? It felt incredibly
I
good.
can absolutely believe you must have got to the top of that, and your heart must have been absolutely singing with joy to achieve that. And what an incredible achievement.
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely. And the joy also of having the people with you that had seen you and been through all your darkness and all your darkest hours, for them also to be part of your celebration and your victories and your progress. We all stood there, and it's it
I've
just
got
brings
absolute
tears to my eyes.
goosebumps
But
just thinking about it, Silje. I really
yeah,
am.
and that's exactly it. And to share life with people that matter, and share your ups and share your downs, because we all are better for being together. I think that is equity. That is what we
Well,
want to
exactly
build, of
that.
fairness and justice. So
Exactly that. And I'd love to talk to you more about your achievements, but time. What would you say to people listening when you're in a situation where it doesn't feel as if there is fairness and equity? What would be your top tips?
oh, good question. I think this answer has got two parts to it. Because I think there is the bravery to stand up and speak up, and choose to sometimes take conflict on, which is easier said than done.
Yeah.
But I also think that the first thing I would say is it has to do with your own attitude. If we start with our own attitude, and try and build a place where it's easier to embrace each other, easier to see value, easier to have people seen and heard. If we are the ones who make sure we build a workplace where there's kindness and not just assuming things of other people, if we are the people who make a cup of tea, or we build something with our attitude and our behavior, then that speaking up becomes a little bit easier to be heard. Because actually, if we are shown to be people who are embracing something, then it's easier then for people to hear us when we have something we want to share. So yeah, it's a twofold answer. I think one is working on our own attitude, but two is also not being afraid of speaking up. And as a conflict shy person, I have to say, one of my top tips is, if you are conflict shy, that's okay. Take a step away from a situation. Write down what you need to say, so that when you do speak up, and when you go to a person in charge and you say, you know what, this wasn't right, and I'm telling you what I saw, and you've processed it beforehand. Because I think that is so important, that when we do speak up, and it's something we need to work on. It's not easy, and we don't always get it right, but don't be afraid, because actually speaking up for what's right does matter.
That's so powerful. And I think there are so many people who would really, really think about that, and think about how sometimes we will shy away from these things, or we won't stand up, or we won't say what we think, but we'll keep it all inside. And, if people don't know how you're feeling, or how something they've said has affected you, then they can't do anything.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly
So
right.
we're talking very much about an inclusive world, and I wonder what messages you would send to women who are fighting for equity. So whether it's race, religion, whether it's sex, whether it's from their sexual orientation, what messages would you send?
My first is, I always impressed with people who stand up for something that matters, something that they think is right. That impresses me. The stories of people who have fought for something like women's rights, who didn't see it fulfilled in their lifetime, but it made a difference to generations, and that always impresses me. But I think my top tip would be, make sure you look after yourself. It can be quite a draining thing to stand on the front line. Make sure you have good people around you. make sure you fill your day with one or two things that actually, not just, because a lot of times people like that will be giving and giving and giving of themselves, which is great, but we can't give if we're empty. And I think make sure that you look after yourself, make sure that whatever fight you're fighting, whatever cause you're fighting for, that somebody is there to champion you, to support you, and to be there when it's difficult, but also to help you fill yourself up again, so you don't burn out. Because I think a lot of people who fight for things can become despondent, can become just feel like they're not getting anywhere. But actually make sure that you're looking after yourself. That is my top tip.
I think that is so true, because as you mentioned, the front line, but if you feel like you have got battles that you're facing, it can be exhausting. So final question, thinking about men, and as you said, you've got a very supportive husband who has been through all this, but if you're going to send a message out to men about how they could be allies more for women to embrace equity, what do you think you'd say to them?
Listen. I think my top tip is, just because it's not an issue for you doesn't mean it's not an issue. And I think a lot of times we don't understand what people are going through, because they may be not telling us, which is our responsibility to say how we're feeling and all that stuff. But also, it's sometimes we think because we're not in it, it's not real, and actually that's not helpful. What we want is to be able for everybody to bring value. We want everybody to have a place. We want everybody to be able to tap into their potential, and don't be afraid, because actually that doesn't make the world a worse place. It makes the world a beautiful place. So to be able to listen, I think is my number one tip for especially men, to become champions of people who are fighting these causes. Because if we listen better, we understand better. And I always say one of the greatest gift we can give to anybody is for them to be seen and heard. That is a beautiful gift we can give to anybody, whether you're a CEO or you're a mum or a dad or a partner, to be able to share the gift of just letting people know that they're seen and they're heard. And that happens through our actions, that happens through listening. And then be those allies, be those champions of people who are fighting for what's right, fighting for justice and tolerance and fairness, and for everybody to not just have a pair of shoes, but for everybody to have a pair of shoes that fits, to be able to be contributors. That makes a great workplace, that makes a great family, that makes a great community, and that's what we want. So yeah.
It's so true, and I think you're absolutely right. Nobody can know how it can feel. I can't imagine what it would have felt like for you in your scenario. You can't assume. We have to listen, and we have to be curious and ask those questions.
Absolutely. And just because I chose to have my leg amputated, and that was a great thing for me, doesn't mean I then don't listen to others that feel that is a pain, feel that is like their life has been turned upside down and they didn't want it. We can't assume just because the way we see something and the way we feel something, that's exactly the way somebody else sees and feels something. And I think it is so important that we make sure that everybody is heard, everybody is seen, and that from there we build something beautiful together. And I think we all have value, and I think that is so important to know that equality, yes, but equity it's about more of bringing us all together, and that comes first.
So you honestly are a beacon of positivity, and I'm sure that people will be very inspired for your message. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope that the rest of your rehab goes well.
Thank you, Gillian. Appreciate that.